The hydrophone crackled to life at 0600 hours, and I knew immediately we'd found something extraordinary. "Ember, are you getting this?" I leaned over her shoulder as she adjusted the frequency filters, my coffee growing cold in the mug I'd forgotten I was holding. The sound filled the Meridian's communications bay like nothing I'd ever heard. Voices, real voices, rising and falling in perfect harmony from somewhere deep in the Mariana Trench. Not whale song. I'd spent 15 years studying cetacean communication, and this was something completely different. "It's coming from 32,000 feet, Ember said, her fingers dancing across the controls. "Maybe deeper. The signal's so clean it's like they're right next to the hydrophone array." I grabbed the spectrogram printout as it rolled off the machine. The frequency patterns made my hands shake. Complex mathematical progressions, harmonic structures that suggested vocal cords the size of subway cars. Whatever was making this sound had to be huge. "Jacob," I called across the lab, "get over here and tell me our equipment isn't malfunctioning." Jacob Bowers looked up from the submersible prep checklist, his dark eyes immediately focusing on the readouts. He studied the data for 30 seconds before shaking his head. "All systems are running perfectly. Signal strength is off the charts, though. These things are loud." The singing swelled again, and I felt goosebumps rise on my arms. It sounded like a choir of angels, if angels lived in the deepest parts of the ocean and had voices that could carry through miles of crushing water. "Knox, how soon can we get Nereid ready for descent?" I was already mentally cataloging the equipment we'd need: acoustic recording arrays, water sampling systems, the high-definition camera package. Knox Fields appeared in the doorway, his pale blue eyes looking around at the excited faces by the hydrophone station. "Depends on how deep you're planning to go. If you're talking about chasing sounds from 30,000 feet, we need to run full pressure checks on every system." "Do it." I turned back to the spectrogram, tracing the harmonic patterns with my finger. This could be the discovery of the century, a completely unknown species with vocal capabilities that rival human music. Jaden Banks practically bounced over from his workstation, his camera already recording everything. "Dr. Lane, look at these frequency ranges. Some of these calls are below human hearing, but others are in ranges that should be impossible at that depth. The pressure alone should prevent this kind of sound production." I nodded, my mind racing through what this could mean. Deep-sea gigantism was well documented, but nothing this large had ever been found. And the intelligence suggested by these harmonic structures. "Ember, can you isolate individual voices?" She worked the controls, and suddenly we could hear individual singers within the chorus. At least 12 separate voices, maybe more, blending together in patterns that reminded me of Bach's most complex fugues. "They're talking to each other," I whispered. "This isn't just random vocalization. This is communication." Jacob was already yanking gear from the storage lockers. "I'll need at least 3 hours to get the sound array set up right. The pressure casings for the recording stuff need a complete check." "Knox, what's our weather window?" "Seas are calm for the next 18 hours. After that, we've got a storm system moving in from the west." Knox's expression remained skeptical. "You sure about this, Dr. Lane? 30,000 feet is deeper than we've ever taken Nereid." I looked around at my team. Ember was totally focused on the hydrophone data, her face bright with the same thrill I felt. Jaden was writing down everything, his scholarly excitement spreading to all of us. Jacob had already begun checking his gear, trusting my judgment, even though he didn't completely get what we were after. "We're going down," I said. "Whatever's making these sounds, we're going to find it." The singing continued as we worked, growing stronger as the morning went on. By the time Jacob finished his pressure checks and Ember had the communication systems ready, the harmonies were so clear they seemed to shake through the Meridian's hull itself. I stood at the viewport, staring down at the dark water that concealed our discovery. Somewhere in those depths, intelligence was calling to us. And for the first time in my career, I felt like we might actually be ready to answer. I pressed my face against the viewport as the first lights appeared in the darkness below us. Jacob, are you seeing this? The bioluminescent trails streaked past our cameras like underwater shooting stars, but these weren't random. They moved in formation, spiraling around each other in perfect geometric patterns. I'm getting massive electromagnetic interference, Jacob called from his station, frowning at the sonar displays. The mapping system keeps cutting out. Something down there is messing with our electronics. 25,000 feet. We were deeper than most of the ocean floor, descending into a part of the Mariana Trench that had never been properly explored. The singing had grown so loud I could feel it vibrating through Nereid's titanium hull. Surface communication is getting sketchy, Ember reported, adjusting her headset. Major delays, lots of static. The Meridian might as well be on another planet. I watched the glowing patterns change outside our window. Not plankton. These creatures were too big, too coordinated. They flashed in rhythm like a living constellation, keeping just beyond our camera's reach. Knox, check our descent rate. He studied the controls, his pale eyes narrowing. That's weird. We're dropping faster than programmed, but all systems show normal operation. Ballast is stable, thrusters are responding. The singing swelled again, and I felt that strange pull I'd noticed earlier. Multiple voices wove together in harmonies that reminded me of humpback whale songs, but far more complex. Mathematical progressions that suggested intelligence way beyond anything we'd documented in marine life. Jaden, what are you getting on the side cameras? They're following us. His voice carried a mix of excitement and nervousness. The bioluminescent organisms. They've been maintaining the same distance from our hull for the past 1,000 feet. I moved to the water sampling station, watching as the automated collection system pulled in specimens from outside. The temperature readings made no sense. Deep water should be stable, just above freezing, but our sensors showed wild swings between 32 and 45 degrees. Everyone start recording everything. Full documentation protocol. I looked at the water samples under the microscope, and my breath caught. Organic compounds I'd never seen before. Protein chains that seemed almost artificial in their complexity, floating in the water like tiny machinery. 28,000 feet, Knox announced. The singing struck us with startling power. The harmonies were so clear now they seemed to come from inside the submersible itself, vibrating through every surface. I found myself stopping mid-motion, just listening to the incredible beauty of it. Dr. Lane? Jaden's voice sounded distant. Are you okay? I shook my head, forcing myself to focus. The music was beautiful, but there was something about it that made me want to just sit and listen forever. That couldn't be normal. Jacob, are you recording the acoustic data? Every frequency. This is incredible, Dr. Lane. The harmonic structures are more complex than anything in our databases. It's like they're using mathematical principles we haven't discovered yet. Through the viewport, the glowing trails grew more intense, nearer. I could see individual creatures now, enormous jellyfish-like beings with see-through bodies that lit up from inside. They moved with clear intent, their movements matching the eerie melodies that flooded our cabin. 30,000 feet coming up, Knox said, but his voice sounded strange, relaxed. You know, this singing is really something. I glanced around at my team. Ember was gazing out the viewport with a dreamy expression. Jaden had quit taking notes, his hands sitting still on his tablet. Even Jacob seemed hypnotized by his acoustic readings. The water samples showed more of those weird proteins, levels that kept climbing as we went deeper, and the temperature swings were getting wilder, as if the water itself was alive and reacting to us being here. 32,000 feet, Knox announced. We're approaching the source. The singing was everywhere now, beautiful and overwhelming and somehow wrong in ways I couldn't quite identify. Through the viewport, I could see the massive creatures more clearly. Their see-through bodies stretched for hundreds of feet, and inside them, complex structures pulsed with each note of their alien chorus. I forced myself to look away from the captivating display and focus on the data. Whatever we'd found down here, it was unlike anything in the scientific literature. And something about the way my team was reacting to those enchanting songs made me think we might be in more danger than we realized. I pressed my face against the main window as we hit 30,000 feet, and I couldn't breathe. Jesus Christ, I whispered. There they are. Massive see-through creatures floated through the darkness like living cathedrals. Their bodies stretched for hundreds of feet, radiating soft, glowing patterns that pulsed in rhythm with their songs. They resembled jellyfish, but jellyfish the size of city blocks, their transparent flesh revealing complex internal structures that looked nothing like anything I'd ever seen in marine biology. Jacob, please tell me you're getting this on camera. Every second, he breathed, his hands steady on the controls despite the awe in his voice. High definition, full spectrum. This is going to rewrite every textbook on deep-sea life. The creatures moved with careful grace, their massive bodies flowing through the water in perfect sync with their haunting songs. Through their see-through flesh, I could see networks of what looked like vocal chambers or sound-making structures, organs that went against everything I knew about ocean life. Surface communication is degrading fast, Ember reported, adjusting her headset with obvious frustration. Major delays, heavy static interference. It's like something's jamming our signals. Knox made a face at his navigation display. That's not the only thing going wrong. Our positioning system is giving me conflicting readings. According to this, we're at 28,000 feet and 32,000 feet at the same time. I watched as several of the huge beings seemed to notice our presence. Their movements changed, becoming more deliberate as they turned toward Nereid. The singing changed too, growing more focused and intense. The pressure readings don't make sense either, Jaden said, his voice tight with confusion. We should be experiencing crushing force at this depth, but the external sensors are showing fluctuations that shouldn't be possible. I turned back to the water samples, examining the latest collection under the microscope. The protein structures I'd found earlier were more concentrated now, complex organic molecules that looked almost engineered. Chains of amino acids arranged in patterns that seemed too perfect, too organized for natural evolution. Dr. Lane, Jacob called softly. Look at this. I moved to his station, where the acoustic analysis showed the creature's songs broken down into component frequencies. Mathematical progressions, harmonic ratios that followed principles I recognized from advanced physics rather than biology. The singing grew louder around us, and I felt that hypnotic pull again. The melodies were so beautiful, so perfectly constructed, that I found myself wanting to just stand and listen. My pen slipped from my fingers as the harmonies washed over me. Everyone stay focused, I said, forcing myself to look away from the mesmerizing display outside. Document everything, but don't get lost in the music. Through the viewport, the massive creatures continued their slow dance, their see-through bodies revealing secrets that marine science had never imagined. But something about the way they moved, the way their songs seemed designed to capture and hold attention, made me wonder if we were watching them, or if they were studying us. The beautiful melody filled our cabin, and I realized with growing worry that the music felt less like communication and more like a carefully crafted trap. I grabbed Knox's shoulder and shook him hard. "Knox, emergency ballast now." He blinked slowly, his pale eyes unfocused. "Already did that. Full release 10 minutes ago." His voice sounded dreamy, distant. "We're still sinking though. Weird, right?" My stomach dropped. Full ballast release should have sent us rocketing toward the surface. Instead, the depth gauge showed 34,000 feet and climbing. We were going deeper. "Jacob, what's our actual buoyancy status?" "All systems show positive buoyancy," he said without looking up from his screens. "But the depth sensors don't lie. We're descending at 40 feet per minute." I pressed my face against the viewport and immediately wished I hadn't. The massive transparent creatures had moved closer, surrounding Nereid completely. Through their clear flesh, I could see what I'd mistaken for vocal chambers earlier. Digestive cavities, filled with half-dissolved organic matter that pulsed and churned with each haunting note of their songs. "Jesus," I whispered, forcing myself to keep looking. Smaller shapes moved weakly inside the creatures' bodies. Fish, squid, things I couldn't identify. Still alive. Still struggling. "The harmonics are incredible," Ember said softly, her hands motionless over the communication controls. "Listen to how they layer the frequencies. It's like they're speaking directly to our nervous systems." I spun around. Ember stared out the viewport with glassy eyes, completely captivated. Jaden had stopped taking notes entirely, his tablet forgotten in his lap as he listened to the strange chorus with a blank expression. The singing grew louder again, and I felt that hypnotic pull trying to drag me under. The melodies were so beautiful, so perfectly crafted. Part of me wanted to just stand here and listen forever. I bit down hard on my tongue, using the pain to snap myself back to focus. The water samples. I needed to check the water samples. My hands trembled as I studied the latest sample under the microscope. The protein structures had spread throughout everything now, complex organic compounds floating in the water like some kind of chemical cocktail. Neurotoxins. Psychoactive agents. The creatures weren't just singing to us, they were drugging us. "Knox, emergency ascent procedures, right now." He turned toward me slowly, his movements sluggish. "I told you, we already tried that. The ballast tanks are empty." "Then use the emergency thrusters, full power upward." "Sure thing, Dr. Lane." But his hands moved like he was underwater, reaching for controls with deliberate slowness. Through the viewport, I watched one of the huge creatures stretch something toward our hull. Not a tentacle exactly, but a flowing part of its clear body, reaching out like it was feeling our submersible's surface. "Jacob, are you getting this on camera?" "Every second," he murmured, but his voice carried that same dreamy quality. "Look how graceful they are. Like living art." The creature's appendage made contact with our hull, and I felt a slight vibration through the floor. Then another one approached from the opposite side, its massive body blocking out what little light filtered down from above. I grabbed the emergency manual and started flipping through procedures, fighting against the overwhelming urge to just stop and listen to those gorgeous, hypnotic songs. The melodies seemed to buzz through my bones, making it hard to think clearly. "Jaden, I need you to help me with the manual override systems." He didn't respond, just sat there staring out the viewport with that blank, peaceful expression. I slammed my hand against the bulkhead, the sharp sound cutting through the musical haze. "Everyone listen to me. We're in a feeding ground. Those things aren't trying to communicate. They're hunting us." But even as I said it, I could feel the songs pulling at my consciousness. trying to convince me that everything was fine, that we should just relax and enjoy this incredible discovery. The water around us was full of chemical compounds designed to make prey passive and obedient. Through the viewport, more creatures floated into view. Dozens of them, their see-through bodies showing the terrifying truth of what they really were, and we were dropping deeper into their territory with every passing minute. I slapped the emergency mask over my face and sucked in clean air, the fog in my brain clearing just enough to see how screwed we really were. The oxygen we'd been breathing was poisoned, chemical compounds from those things seeping through tiny cracks in our air filtration system. "Jaden!" I grabbed his shoulders and shook him hard. "Wake up!" His eyes snapped into focus, pupils wide but alert. "What, Dr. Lane? I feel like I've been dreaming." "You have been. We all have." I thrust a spare emergency mask at him. "Put this on, now." Jacob sat frozen at his workstation, fingers hovering over the keys while endless data flowed past, ignored. His monitors displayed the creatures approaching, their enormous bodies closing in on our location like walking hills. But he just gazed at the displays with that same calm look on his face. "Jacob." No response. I moved to Knox's station where he sat with his hands on the emergency ballast controls, completely still. "Knox, emergency ascent." Nothing. His pale eyes tracked the glowing patterns outside the viewport, mesmerized. Ember was worse. She leaned toward her communication array, whispering into her headset in broken fragments that almost sounded like the creature's songs. "Can you hear me? I know you're trying to tell us something. We want to understand." "Ember, stop." I yanked the headset away from her. "They're not trying to communicate, they're hunting us." She looked at me with glassy eyes. "You're wrong. Listen to the patterns. They're so beautiful, so complex. They're trying to teach us something." Through the viewport, I made myself really look at what we'd found. The huge, transparent creatures drifted closer, and through their clear flesh I could see the awful truth. Thousands of shapes floated in digestive chambers. Fish, squid, bigger sea mammals in different stages of breakdown, and scattered among them clearly human artifacts, diving helmets, pieces of submersibles, what looked like the remains of pressure suits. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "Jaden, look at this." He pressed his face against the viewport, the emergency mask clouding up from his quick breaths. "Are those previous expeditions the ones that went missing?" My hand shook as I grabbed the emergency manual. These things have been hunting deep-sea research teams for decades. The singing grew louder around us, and I felt that hypnotic pull trying to drag me back under. The melodies were so perfectly built, so mathematically exact. Evolution had created the ultimate trap. Songs that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to the nervous system. Hair-thin tentacles began exploring our hull, sliding across the viewport like see-through fingers. They moved with clear intent, searching for weak spots, testing our defenses. "The navigation system," I said, forcing myself to focus. "Help me override the automatic controls." Jaden stumbled to the navigation console, his movements still sluggish from the chemical exposure. "The depth readings are all wrong. We're showing 36,000 feet now." Emergency alarms suddenly shrieked through the cabin. Red lights flashed across every control panel as hull breach warnings cascaded down our screens. The creatures had found what they were looking for. "Hull integrity compromised," the automated system announced in its calm electronic voice. "Multiple microfractures detected. Pressure differential increasing." I watched the creatures clamp onto our hull, their enormous bodies pressing against Nereid's titanium shell. The mass of them made the submersible creak and tilt sideways. Any hope of emergency ascent had vanished. We were pinned to the bottom by tons of living predator. Jacob! I slapped his face hard enough to leave a mark. I need you to focus. Right now. He blinked, confusion replacing the dreamy expression. Dr. Lane? What's going on? We're being hunted. I need you to help me with the emergency systems. The tentacles pushed harder against the viewport, and I could see acidic liquid starting to eat into the reinforced glass. These things weren't just drifting filter feeders. They were smart hunters that had figured out how to go after anything with advanced technology. The singing kept going, beautiful and deadly, as more creatures came up from the depths to join the feeding frenzy. I forced myself to focus on the emergency panel, while those mesmerizing melodies tried to pull my thoughts back into the haze. My hands trembled as I began the protocols, muscle memory from years of safety drills fighting against the chemical fog clouding my brain. Jaden, I need you at the backup systems console. Now. He stumbled over, still wearing his emergency mask, movements slow but steady. What are we doing? Getting us out of here before they finish whatever they're doing to our hull. I flipped open the manual override panel, exposing rows of switches and emergency controls. Start the secondary ballast sequence. Red switches first, then the blue ones. Through the viewport, more tentacles pressed against the reinforced glass. But these weren't random movements. The creatures were testing specific points, probing for weak spots with surgical precision. They'd done this before. Many times. Dr. Lane, Jacob's voice cut through the singing, clearer now that he'd shaken off some of the chemical influence. I'm picking up low-frequency communications between them. They're coordinating. What kind of communications? Subsonic pulses, below human hearing range. He adjusted his equipment, frowning at the readouts. It's like they're sharing information about our hull composition, our weak points. They're working together. Knox suddenly jerked upright at his station, gasping like he'd been underwater. Jesus Christ, the oxygen levels, we're losing atmosphere fast. I checked the environmental controls. He was right. Our air pressure was dropping steadily, not from a catastrophic breach, but from dozens of tiny punctures. The creatures weren't trying to crack us open like a shell. They were creating controlled leaks, slowly draining our life support. They're not just breaking in, I said, the horrible realization hitting me. They're suffocating us first. Ember's voice carried from her station, still working to copy the creature's songs. Can you hear those deeper notes? They're so layered, so beautiful. I think they're trying to tell us about the deep currents, about how the ocean really works down here. Ember, stop. But even as I said it, I could see more massive shapes rising from below, drawn by her attempts at communication. Each one was the size of a city block, transparent flesh revealing the horrifying museum of previous expeditions suspended in their digestive chambers. Jaden finished the ballast sequence, but our depth gauge barely moved. It's not working. We're still going down. I pressed my face against the side viewport and immediately understood why. The creatures had anchored us. Thick, powerful tentacles wrapped around Nereid's hull like living cables, their hold so tight I could see stress fractures forming in our titanium shell. Jacob, tell me you're recording all of this. Every second. His voice carried a new edge of fear. Dr. Lane, some of these acoustic patterns match historical records. Ships that went missing in deep water. Research vessels that just vanished. The last transmissions always mentioned strange sounds. Knox worked frantically at his controls, running through every emergency procedure in the manual. Full ballast release, emergency thrusters, even the explosive bolts. Nothing's working. These things have us locked down tight. Through the main viewport, I watched one of the creatures stretch out what looked like a feeding tube toward our hull. The appendage moved with careful intent, probing our surface until it found a tiny breach near the communications array. "They're not just hunters," I whispered, watching the tube begin secreting some kind of acidic compound. "They're parasites. They've learned to target anything with advanced technology." The singing swelled again, and I felt that hypnotic pull trying to convince me everything was fine, that we should just relax and let these magnificent beings do what they needed to do. But now I could see the evolutionary trap for what it really was. Millions of years of development had created the perfect predator for the deep ocean, something that could lure, drug, and slowly consume anything that ventured into their territory. "Knox, how long before our air runs out completely?" He checked the environmental systems, his expression dark. "At this rate, maybe 20 minutes, less if they keep opening new holes." Through Jacob's monitors, I could see the creatures' clear bodies more clearly now. The remains floating in their digestive chambers weren't just random debris, diving helmets from the 1960s, pieces of Soviet research submarines, equipment from expeditions that had been listed as equipment failures or navigational errors. "My God," I breathed. "They've been hunting us for decades. Every deep-sea mission that went missing, every research vessel that just vanished." "Dr. Lane." Jaden's voice was tight with fear. "Look at the hull breach warnings." The emergency display lit up with red warnings everywhere. Dozens of tiny cracks spread across our pressure hull like a spider web. The creatures weren't just stealing our air. They were breaking down our ship, piece by piece. That gorgeous, lethal song kept playing around us, every note designed to keep victims relaxed and obedient while they started feeding. And we kept dropping deeper into their hunting grounds with each passing moment. I grabbed Jaden's arm and pulled him toward the emergency equipment locker. "We're leaving. Right now." "What?" He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Dr. Lane, we can't survive outside at this depth. We can't survive in here either." I yanked open the emergency suit compartment, my hands shaking as I pulled out the first diving rig. "Look at the hull breach warnings. We've got minutes before this whole thing implodes." The emergency display showed cascading red alerts across every system. Tiny cracks spread like a web across our pressure hull, while those hair-thin tentacles kept probing, kept testing, kept finding new ways in. "Knox!" I slapped his shoulder hard. "I need you functional. Emergency diving protocols." He blinked slowly, that dreamy look still clouding his pale eyes. "Emergency diving? At 36,000 feet, that's suicide. So is staying here." I thrust a diving suit at him. "These things are pumping digestive enzymes into our air supply. You want to dissolve from the inside out?" That got through to him. Knox's military training kicked in, overriding whatever chemical fog was clouding his brain. He grabbed the suit and started checking the seals with practiced efficiency. "Jacob." I moved to his station where he sat motionless, staring at readouts that showed our electrical systems failing one by one. "Jacob, we need to move." No response. His hand sat on his keyboard while data streams scrolled past unread. The creatures had learned to hit our electronics first, systematically breaking everything that might help us escape. I slapped him across the face, hard. His eyes snapped into focus. "Dr. Lane, the equipment's all wrong. Nothing's working right." "Because they're killing it on purpose. These things hunt technology." I grabbed his arm and hauled him toward the emergency gear. "Suit up. Now." Ember's voice drifted from her communication station, still trying to copy those mesmerizing melodies. The harmonic patterns in the low frequencies. They're teaching us about pressure changes, about how awareness works in the deep. We just need to listen. "Ember, stop." But even as I said it, the creature's response was immediate. Their songs swelled louder, more complex, keeping her perfectly calm while their tentacles punched new holes in our hull. Jaden yanked on his emergency suit, his fingers fumbling with the clasps. Dr. Lane, I ran the numbers. Even if we get outside, these suits only carry 30 minutes of oxygen. Our climb rate from this depth. I know the math. I sealed my helmet and checked the oxygen gauge. 32 minutes of air, maybe 35 if I controlled my breathing perfectly. We're not going to make it to the surface. Then why are we doing this? Because dying fast is better than dying slow. Through the viewport, I watched the creatures pump more of that acidic fluid into our ventilation system. The air already tasted wrong, metallic and sharp. Whatever they were releasing would dissolve our lungs long before the pressure hull gave out completely. Knox finished sealing his suit and moved to the emergency beacon controls. I'm turning on the distress signal. Maybe the Meridian can send down rescue pods. From 36,000 feet? No rescue sub can reach us here. Then at least they'll know what happened. His fingers worked the controls with military precision. Someone needs to warn other expeditions about these things. The beacon turned on, broadcasting our location and distress call toward the surface. But the signal had to push through miles of water, teeming with creatures that appeared to soak up or bend electronic signals off course. Ember! I grabbed her shoulders and shook hard. We're leaving. Right now. She looked at me with glassy eyes, completely calm. You don't understand. They're not trying to hurt us. The songs contain information about deep ocean ecosystems, about how life really works down here. We just need to decode the patterns. The only pattern is that they're killing us. I tried to pull her toward the emergency suits, but she resisted, turning back to her communication array. Listen to the mathematical progressions. Fibonacci sequences in the harmonic structures. They're trying to teach us something about consciousness itself. The creatures responded to her voice by making their songs louder. The melodies became so beautiful, so perfectly put together, that I felt my own determination starting to crack. Maybe she was right. Maybe we just needed to pay closer attention. I bit down hard on my tongue, using the pain to snap back to reality. The chemical stuff in our air was messing with my judgment too. Jaden, help me with her. Together we grabbed Ember's arms and pulled her away from the communication station. She didn't fight us, just kept making those strange tune fragments while we forced her into an emergency suit. The emergency pods, Knox said, checking the manual systems. If we can get to the escape pods, they have independent life support. Can we launch them? Maybe, if the explosive bolts still work. He moved to the pod controls, his movements sharp and focused now. But we'll have to override the safety protocols. The system won't let us launch at this depth. Through Jacob's monitors, I could see more creatures coming up from below. Dozens of them. Their huge see-through bodies heading straight for us like moving mountains. Our little disturbance had gotten the attention of something way bigger than we'd thought. The hull groaned under the weight of the organisms stuck to our outside. Cracks spread across the titanium shell while those digestive enzymes ate through our air filtration system. How long before the hull gives out completely? I asked. Jacob checked his structural monitors, his face tight behind his helmet visor. Maybe 5 minutes, less if they keep piling on more weight. I looked around at my team, Knox working frantically at the pod controls, Jaden helping Ember seal her helmet while she buzzed those deadly songs. Jacob tracking our final moments on screens that blinked and died one by one. We were about to bet our lives on emergency equipment that had never been tested at this depth, carrying oxygen that wouldn't last half the climb to safety. But the alternative was staying here and dissolving slowly, while those beautiful, mesmerizing melodies convinced us everything was fine. "Override the safety protocols," I told Knox. "Launch the pods." I slammed my fist on the emergency explosive controls. "Knox, override the safety locks. Now." His hands flew across the panel with military precision, hitting switches one after another. Safety protocols disabled. Explosive bolts armed. "Jacob!" I grabbed his shoulder and shook him hard. "I need you functional for 30 seconds. Help me with the pod launch sequence." He blinked, confusion clearing from his eyes as he focused on the control panel. "Pod launch. Dr. Lane, the safety parameters." "Forget the parameters. We're dead if we stay here." I pointed at the hull breach warnings cascading across our screens. "Those things are dissolving us from the inside out." Through the porthole, I could see more tentacles coiling around our hull. The creatures had us completely trapped now, their huge bodies pressing against Nereid's titanium shell like living mountains. "Ember, we're leaving. Right now." I moved toward her station where she sat humming fragments of those hypnotic melodies. She looked up at me with glassy eyes, completely calm. "You don't get what they're trying to tell us. The harmonic structures have information about deep ocean ecosystems, about how consciousness works at these pressures. We can't leave now. The only thing they're telling us is how they digest their prey." I grabbed her arm, but she pulled away. "Listen to the mathematical progressions. They're teaching us about the relationship between pressure and neural activity. This could revolutionize our understanding of marine intelligence." Jaden moved behind her while she was distracted. "Sorry, Ember." He wrapped his arms around her shoulders, pinning her arms to her sides. She didn't struggle, just kept making those deadly sounds while we dragged her toward the escape pods. "You're making a mistake. They're not predators. They're teachers." Knox finished the override sequence. Explosive bolts ready. Pod systems show green across the board. "Jacob, can you handle Pod 4 with Ember?" He nodded, his movements sharp and focused now. "I've got her. But Dr. Lane, these pods weren't built for this depth. The pressure difference." "I know." I sealed my pod's hatch and checked the emergency oxygen supply. 28 minutes of air. Maybe 30 if I controlled my breathing perfectly. Better to die fast than slow. Through my pod's small window, I could see the creatures reacting to our movement. Their songs changed, growing more aggressive, more urgent. The mesmerizing beauty was gone, replaced by something that sounded like hunting calls. "Initiating explosive separation in 10 seconds, Knox announced over the comm system. I pressed back against the pod's restraints. "Everyone ready?" "Pod 2 ready," Jaden reported. "Pod 3 ready," Knox confirmed. "Pod 4 sealed," Jacob said. "Ember's secure, but still trying to communicate with them." 5 seconds. The creatures seemed to know what was about to happen. Their tentacles squeezed tighter around our hull, and I could hear the titanium groaning under the pressure. 3, 2, 1. The explosion slammed into us with brutal force. My pod shook violently as the emergency bolts went off all at once, blasting us free from the sub's hull. Through all the chaos, I saw the creatures pulling back from the shock wave, their huge bodies twisting like they were in pain. Then we were going up fast, 4 emergency pods racing toward the surface while our mother ship collapsed behind us. "Everyone report status," I called over the emergency comm. "Pod 2 functional," Jaden replied, his voice tight with fear. "Propulsion systems operating normally." "Pod 3 showing minor damage," Knox reported. "Some kind of acidic residue on my hull from contact with those things. But I'm climbing." "Pod 4 has problems." Jacob's voice crackled with static. "Ember's trying to open the emergency hatch. She wants to go back down to them. Through my viewport, I watched the creatures react to our escape attempt. They weren't giving up. Massive shapes rose from the depths below us, their glowing patterns flashing in coordinated bursts. They were calling to each other, organizing a hunt. "Knox, how's your hull integrity?" "Getting worse. Whatever that acid is, it's eating through the emergency seals. I'm losing pressure slowly but steadily." The singing followed us upward, but now it sounded different. Hostile, hungry. The mesmerizing beauty was gone, replaced by something that made my skin crawl. These things were furious that their prey was escaping. 32,000 feet, I reported, watching my depth gauge. Still climbing. But through my small window, I could see we weren't alone. The creatures were stretching out enormous feeding arms upward, reaching for our pods with limbs that extended hundreds of feet through the black water. They moved with clear intent, trying to catch us before we could reach safety. "Jacob, status on Ember?" Restrained but conscious, she keeps insisting we're making a terrible mistake, that the creatures were trying to share knowledge about deep ocean consciousness. My pod's propulsion system strained against the water pressure, the small electric motor working at maximum capacity. The surface seemed so far away, and my oxygen gauge showed 24 minutes remaining. "Movement below us," Jaden reported. "Lots of movement. They're not giving up." I pressed my face against the viewport and immediately regretted it. More creatures were rising from the depths, dozens of them, their see-through bodies creating a living wall between us and the surface. Our little disturbance had gotten the attention of something much bigger than we'd realized. The emergency pods climbed through the darkness while those deadly songs bounced around us, and I realized we were racing against time, oxygen, and an entire ecosystem that had learned to hunt anything with advanced technology. I pressed my face against the pod's viewport and watched the nightmare unfold below us. The creatures weren't just following. They were working together. Massive bioluminescent pulses traveled between them like underwater lightning, and with each flash, more of those see-through giants changed position. "They're talking to each other," I whispered into my comm, "setting up some kind of ambush pattern." "What do you mean?" Jaden's voice crackled with static from Pod 2. Through the murky water, I could see it clearly now. The creatures from the depths were sending signals upward, and things at higher levels were responding. Shapes moved into position along our ascent route, smaller than the giants below, but still huge enough to block our path. "Knox, status report." "Quiet. Knox." His voice came through weak and strained. "Hull breach is getting worse. That acid ate through my emergency seals completely. I'm working the ballast controls by hand, but my oxygen gauge is dropping fast." My own gauge showed 8 minutes remaining. We were at 22,000 feet, climbing steadily but not fast enough. Not nearly fast enough. "Jacob, how's Ember?" "She's back with us," Jacob reported from Pod 4. "Whatever hold those things had on her broke when we got away from the main group, but our propulsion took damage from the explosive separation. We're climbing maybe half as fast as the rest of you." I checked my depth readings. Jacob was right. Pod 4 was falling behind, dropping to almost 300 feet below us. In the dark water between our positions, I could see movement. The creatures were testing the gap, seeing if they could separate us completely. The singing changed again. The mesmerizing melodies were gone, replaced by rapid pulses that sounded like sonar pings. They were mapping our positions, tracking our movement patterns. "Emergency beacon activated," my pod's automated system announced. "Surface contact established." Finally, I grabbed the communication handset. "Meridian, this is Dr. Lane in Emergency Pod 1. We have 4 pods climbing from 36,000 feet. Request immediate rescue support. The response came through heavy with static. Dr. Lane, this is Captain Morrison. We're tracking your climb, but our rescue divers can't safely reach where you are now. You'll need to keep going up to at least 2,000 feet before we can help. 2,000 feet. I checked my oxygen gauge. 6 minutes left. Even if everything went perfectly, I'd be out of air long before reaching rescue depth. Understood, Meridian. Be advised, we have hostile marine life pursuing our ascent. Large organisms, possibly dangerous to surface operations. Copy that. We're monitoring sonar contacts below your position. Recommend maximum ascent rate. Through my viewport, I watched Knox's pod shake as he battled to stay in control. His hull was breached, his oxygen dropping fast, and he was running systems by hand that should have been automatic. Every few seconds, his pod would veer sideways as he wrestled with the controls. Knox, you need to make a choice, I said into the comm. Stay at depth and try to fix your systems, or risk rapid ascent with a damaged hull. Already made the choice. His voice was getting weaker. I'm coming up fast. If the pressure differential kills me, at least it'll be quick. I watched his pod suddenly speed up, shooting toward the surface way faster than it should. He was betting everything on reaching the top before his air gave out, even though coming up too quick could kill him just as easily as running out of oxygen. Movement above us, Jaden reported. 20,000 feet. Something big. I looked up through my viewport, and my stomach dropped. Dark shapes moved against the weak light drifting down from above. Creatures stationed at different depths, creating a gauntlet we'd have to run. The things below had called ahead, warning their cousins at higher levels. They're everywhere, I whispered. The whole trench system is connected. The implications stunned me. This wasn't just a local population of deep-sea predators. This was a network spanning the entire ocean floor, creatures that could communicate across vast distances and coordinate hunting strategies. Every deep-sea research mission, every offshore drilling operation, every submarine that had mysteriously vanished, they'd all encountered this same intelligence. My emergency beacon crackled again. Dr. Lane, we're detecting multiple large contacts rising toward your position. Some appear to be following you toward the surface. Following us toward the surface. The creatures weren't limited to the deep trenches. They could hunt in shallower waters too, which meant shipping lanes, offshore platforms, even coastal installations could be at risk. Meridian, you need to alert maritime authorities immediately. These organisms represent a threat to all deep-water operations. Copy that. We're already preparing emergency broadcasts. 15,000 feet. My oxygen gauge showed 3 minutes left. Knox's pod was climbing fast but shaking badly as his busted systems fought against the pressure changes. Jacob and Ember were falling further back, their damaged engines no match for the creatures moving to cut them off. Through the water around us, I could see the hunting network at work. Glowing signals pulsed between creatures at different depths, organizing their movements with accuracy that came from millions of years of evolution. They'd learned to work as a team, to use the ocean's layers like a three-dimensional chessboard. 2 minutes of oxygen left, I announced to the team. Same here, Jaden replied, but I can see light above us. Real light from the surface. I pressed my face against the viewport and looked up. Far above, incredibly distant, I could make out the faint glow of sunlight filtering through the water. We were still thousands of feet down, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I could see our destination. The creatures could see it too. Their movements became more frantic, more violent. They knew their prey was getting away, and they were making one final push to stop us. My pod shook as something enormous passed close by, its wake spinning me in a slow circle. Through the rotating viewport, I caught glimpses of see-through flesh and digestive chambers filled with the remains of previous expeditions. 1 minute of oxygen left. The surface had never looked so impossibly distant. I watched Knox's pod crush like a tin can at 10,000 feet. The pressure hit him in seconds. One moment he was there. The next, his pod was folding inward with a sound like thunder. He didn't have time to scream. My oxygen gauge showed 30 seconds left. "Knox!" I shouted into the comm, but only static answered. Through my viewport, I could see the twisted wreckage of Pod 3 spinning slowly as it sank back into the darkness. The creatures came fast. They swarmed his position, drawn by the noise and the blood. Huge see-through shapes rushed toward the wreckage like living mountains, their feeding frenzy creating a wild light show of glowing flashes. The distraction gave us precious seconds to keep climbing. "Jacob, status report." "Propulsion just died completely." His voice crackled through heavy static. "We're dead in the water at 8,000 feet. Embers. She's not responding to anything." I looked down through the dark water and could see Pod 4 floating still, no longer rising. Jacob and Ember were trapped while those things finished with what was left of Knox. "Jaden, how's your oxygen?" "Gone." His voice was tight with panic. "Switched to emergency reserves 2 minutes ago. Maybe 90 seconds left." My own emergency reserves kicked in with a soft hiss. The gauge showed 2 minutes of air remaining. Above us, I could finally make out the faint shimmer of the surface, but it still looked way too far away. "I can see movement below Jacob's pod," Jaden reported. "They're coming up." Through my viewport, I watched the nightmare unfold. The creatures had finished with Knox and were now rising toward Jacob and Ember's disabled pod. Their see-through bodies moved with purpose, no longer the graceful dancers we'd first encountered. These were predators closing in for another kill. "Jacob, you need to manually operate your ballast system. Dump everything and rise." "Already tried. The explosive separation damaged our emergency controls. We're stuck." The surface was so close now, I could see actual sunlight filtering through the water. My lungs burned as I tried to save the last of my oxygen. 60 seconds left. "Jaden, can you reach them?" "Negative. My pod's not designed for lateral movement, and I'm almost out of air." I made the toughest choice of my career. "Jacob, get ready to ditch Pod 4. Emergency swim to the surface." "From 8,000 feet? That's suicide." "Staying is suicide too. Those things are 30 seconds away from your position." Through the water below, I could see the creatures' glowing patterns flashing as they talked to each other. They'd figured out our escape route, studied our technology, and now they were picking us off one by one. My pod broke the surface with a violent jolt. Actual air, actual sunlight, actual sky. I gasped as the emergency hatch popped open and the Meridian's rescue team grabbed my pod. "Get ready to move," I told them, still catching my breath. "There are things coming up from below. Big things." The rescue diver looked confused. "Ma'am, we need to get you to medical." "Listen to me." I grabbed his arm. "There are 3 more pods down there and something is hunting them. We need to go. Now." Jaden's pod came up 20 seconds later, his emergency hatch already open as he gasped for air. The rescue team pulled him out unconscious, but he was breathing. "Where are the others?" the dive coordinator asked. I pointed at the sonar display mounted on the rescue boat. 8,000 feet down. Pod 4 is disabled, and there's something big moving toward their position. Through the Meridian's underwater cameras, I could see them rising. Huge shapes moving up from the deep, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing like alien constellations. They were testing their limits, seeing how high they could hunt. The ship's sonar painted an even worse picture. Activity in the surrounding trenches. Lots of activity. Our little disturbance had woken up something much bigger than we'd expected. There! The dive coordinator pointed at the water's surface. Pod 4! Jacob and Ember's pod burst through the surface in a shower of spray and foam. The rescue team worked quickly, hauling them both from the damaged capsule. Jacob was awake but drained. Ember was in rough condition. The extended exposure to those mind-altering songs had left her staring blankly, not responding to Jacob's attempts to reach her. "Get us away from this position," I ordered, as they hauled me onto the rescue boat. "Full speed back to the Meridian." "What about the fourth team member?" I looked back at the dark water where Knox had died. There is no fourth team member. The boat's engines roared to life, and we raced toward the research vessel. Behind us, the water started to churn as massive shapes tested the surface, their see-through forms just visible beneath the waves. Through the Meridian's hull-mounted cameras, I watched the creatures probe the upper layers of the ocean. They were learning, changing, figuring out how far they could extend their hunting range. The sonar display revealed the true scale of what we'd disturbed. Activity spread across multiple trench systems. Communications bounced between far-off populations. A vast network of awareness stretched across the ocean floor, and now every part of it was waking up. We'd discovered not just a new species, but an ancient awareness that had been resting in the deep places of the world. And now, they knew we were here. I slammed the lab door behind me and found Dr. Carter hunched over his laptop, typing what looked like another progress report. The guy had no clue what we'd just escaped from down there. "Carter, we need to talk. Now." He looked up with that polite academic smile that meant he was about to dismiss whatever I had to say. "Cynthia, I understand you've been through a traumatic experience, but shut up and watch this." I plugged Jacob's camera into the main display and pulled up the footage from 30,000 feet. "Tell me what you see." The screen filled with those massive clear shapes floating through the darkness. Even on the monitor, their size was staggering. Creatures as long as city blocks moving with deliberate purpose. Carter leaned forward, his face changing from polite concern to real interest. "Remarkable. The size alone suggests." "Keep watching." I fast-forwarded to the part where the tentacles started probing our hull. "Notice how they're testing specific structural points? That's not random behavior." Carter's fingers tapped against the desk as he watched the footage. Through the lab's window, I could see the sun dropping over quiet Pacific waters. We were safe on the surface, but I knew those creatures were still down there. "The coordination is impressive," Carter admitted. "But predatory behavior in deep-sea organisms isn't unprecedented. This is." I switched to Jacob's acoustic analysis. "Listen to the subsonic communications. They're sharing tactical information about our hull composition." The low-frequency pulses filled the lab's speakers, even filtered through our equipment. Something about those sounds made my skin crawl. Carter looked unhappy as he studied the waveform patterns scrolling across the screen. "The mathematical precision is unusual," he said slowly. "But you're asking me to believe these creatures deliberately targeted your submersible?" "I'm asking you to look at the evidence." I pulled up the water sample analysis. Psychoactive compounds, neurotoxins. They were drugging us through our air filtration system. Carter's academic composure finally cracked. He stared at the molecular structures displayed on the screen, his face going pale as he processed what he was seeing. "How is that possible? The engineering required to breach a sealed system. They've had millions of years to perfect their hunting techniques." I switched back to the footage showing the creature's digestive chambers. Look at what's suspended in their bodies. Diving equipment from the 1960s, Soviet submarine components, every deep-sea expedition that's gone missing. Carter pushed back from the desk, his chair rolling across the lab floor. For the first time since I'd known him, the guy looked genuinely rattled. You're suggesting these organisms have been systematically hunting human technology for decades? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what happened. I ejected the data drive and held it up. This footage proves we've stumbled into a hunting ground that spans the entire Pacific Trench system. The lab door opened and Jaden stumbled in, still wearing his emergency suit with the helmet tucked under his arm. His face looked tired and worn out, but his eyes stayed alert. "Dr. Lane, you need to see this." He set his tablet on the lab bench and pulled up a spectrographic analysis. "I've been going through the acoustic data from our ascent. The creatures weren't just communicating with each other." "What do you mean?" "They were calling to other populations. Look at these frequency patterns." He pointed to the display. "Same harmonic structures, but the responses are coming from different locations, thousands of miles apart." Carter leaned over the tablet, his curiosity winning out over the shock. "You're saying there's a network?" "A worldwide network," Jaden confirmed. "I've been cross-referencing with historical data from other research vessels. Every time a deep-sea expedition reports unusual acoustic phenomena before going missing, the frequency signatures match what we recorded." The implication slammed into me. We weren't dealing with a local population of predators. We'd discovered a global intelligence that had been systematically eliminating human deep-sea operations for decades. "Carter, we have to shut down the entire program. Every deep-water expedition, every offshore drilling operation." "Now, hold on." Carter's bureaucratic instincts kicked in. "You're talking about billions of dollars in research funding, international maritime operations. I can't just..." The ship's intercom crackled to life. "Dr. Carter to the bridge immediately. Dr. Carter to the bridge." We looked at each other. Carter grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, with Jaden and me right behind him. The halls of the Meridian felt different now. Too quiet. Too cut off from everything. Every shake through the hull made me think of those huge shapes rising from the deep. Captain Morrison was standing over the sonar display when we reached the bridge, his weathered face serious. "Dr. Carter, we have a problem." The sonar screen showed our position as a bright dot surrounded by darkness. But the darkness wasn't empty. Dozens of contacts moved in the water below us, their locations changing in coordinated patterns. "How deep?" I asked. "Started at 15,000 feet. They're climbing." Morrison pointed to the depth readings. "Whatever you people stirred up down there, it followed you to the surface." Through the bridge windows, the Pacific spread out endlessly in all directions. Calm water, clear skies, no sign of the intelligence hiding beneath. But the sonar told a different story. "They're tracking our electronic signatures," I realized. "Our research equipment, navigation systems, communications array. We're broadcasting our location to every predator in the ocean." Carter stared at the sonar display, watching the contacts move closer to the surface. "This can't be right. Marine organisms don't exhibit this level of coordination." "These aren't just marine organisms." I grabbed his arm. "They're an intelligence that's been hiding in the deep trenches since before humans existed, and now our technology has advanced enough to catch their attention." The ship's underwater microphones picked up the first calls just after sunset. Low-frequency pulses that shook through the Meridian's hull like a drumbeat. The crew tried to ignore them, but I could see the tension building as the sounds grew louder and more complex. By midnight, The calls were coming from all directions.